Very good morning to you all and a very happy Sabbath. Today, I would like to start off with a story that happened some time ago. It was America, it was the mid 1800s, and it was the gold rush in California. There was a father and son, Mr. Darby, who caught kind of the gold fever. He went out to California to do what so many others were doing, and that was to search for the gold that had started to be discovered in hope of finding some and therefore becoming rich. And so he went out west to mine gold and he took pick and shovel, and he and his son started to mine in California, digging and digging and digging, and his early efforts were rewarded with a small bit of gold. And so he invested in some equipment to bring that gold to the surface, some mining equipment. And so, with this newfound motivation of finding the initial gold, of finding this initial success, he continued on with his son. But this time, they dug and dug and dug. And one day turned into 1 week, turned into 1 month, and they didn't find success. Their efforts came to futility. In fact, they grew weary, despondent, and demotivated because all of the efforts that they were putting in weren't producing any fruit. They weren't finding any more gold. And eventually, they got fed up and they decided to sell the mining equipment they had bought in earnest after finding that initial bit of gold to a merchant. And the merchant bought the mining equipment and they left home. The merchants decided to ask an engineer to come and give them advice about where the best place to dig for gold was. And so the engineers came and they understood fault lines within the mountainside. And they actually discovered, when looking at the location where Mr. Derby and his son had dug for gold, that they were only 3 feet away from some gold. And so the merchant started to dig in the right direction. And alas, there was gold, and the merchant found a lot of gold. I think this story can be true to our lives, our spiritual lives. It is so easy to grow weary in well doing, to start off initially motivated, but as time goes on, when we don't see the fruit bear in our lives for the activities and the energies we're putting in, sometimes we go weary, we go tired of the effort we're putting in because we see nothing back. Life is like that. And the Christian walk can so easily become a journey where we become weary. We don't see the fruit manifest that we would like. Things don't work out in our faith communities that we'd otherwise had hoped for. One day turns into 1 week, turns into 1 month, turns into 1 year. And the good that we do day in, day out becomes tiresome, becomes weary. I know that I'm speaking to people today who are experiencing weariness because of time, because the journey is long, because sometimes things do not work out in our lives as we would hope. Sometimes we have to bear burdens day in, day out, and those burdens sometimes don't shift even with prayer, and we grow tired. That is normal and that is natural. It is part of the human condition, and so God has an antidote for us, inspired through the letters of the Apostle Paul, is a small action plan that each one of us can read, and by reading find encouragement to keep going. God does not want you, does not want I to lose heart, but to keep going. And the very real possibility that we can lose heart, that we can get weary, that we can have a lack of hope. And so Paul writes a simple action plan, and that's where we're going to go this morning. We're just going to play around in Galatians chapter 6 in a passage there. Paul writes in verse 9, this simple antidote, this simple admonition to encourage us to keep going, irrespective of how many years we have been in this game, how long the journey has been, how weary we may be. God, through the Apostle Paul, writes to us, to his church, to you and I today. He says, and let us not grow weary. Do not grow tired. I know things are hard. I know the routine sets in. I know things may be mundane. I know the hopes you've had. I know they've been deferred. I know your heart may be sick. I know you've been battling with the trial day in, day out. I know you've prayed about it. I have heard you. But I ask you, do not grow weary. Do not grow weary. Why? Why can God tell us, you and I today, not to grow weary? So it can sustain our motivation, our discipline for the coming years. Because in due season, there is a time coming. You may be in a season of winter where the ground is fallow, where the fruit is not born, but in due season, a season is coming. And with every day that you live, it is getting closer. In due season, you and I, will reap, shall reap, if we do not lose heart. God says, I know things are tough. I know things can be hard. I know you can grow weary. I get it. You are flesh and you are blood. But I'm going to ask you not to leave the construction site. Do not down tools. Just like Mr. Derby, when he was so close to the gold that he was looking for, to the reward, to the fruit of his labors, he decided to step away. And yet he was so close, and it can be with us too. God says, look, your season's coming. You're going to get the things that you so desire, that you have been sowing for, reaping for. But I need you to not lose heart. And he says that to his church. Sometimes we go on wilderness walks, not just in our personal lives, but in our faith communities. And life and our spiritual walk can be wearying. He says, don't lose heart. Don't lose heart. He continues in verse 10. Therefore, this is a call to action now, a call to action. How are we not going to lose heart? God says, I'm going to reward you. Yes, there's going to be a time where it's going to be tough, but there will be a season of reward coming in your life and in my life. That is both now in this life, but also in the kingdom, the wonderful world tomorrow. It's coming. So therefore, what are we going to do now? God says in verse 10, this is an admonition for you and I. It is an action plan. It makes our life so meaningful if we can just apply this verse. It is so simple. It is so simple, and God calls us to this. He says, as we have opportunity, and you today have opportunity, I have opportunity. In fact, I would say that behind the tone of this scripture is not just as you have opportunity, go out and find that opportunity. If you don't want to grow weary, if you're in a season where things have been tough, hard, difficult, then go and do this. Let us do good. Keep doing good. Keep turning up. Keep living a life of give. Keep making space for others. Keep your eyes attuned and focused to the needs of the people around you. He says, look, as you find opportunity, let us do good to all, to everyone, whoever we come into contact with, but especially to those who are of the household of faith. You and I, in our week, our priority, our dominion, our landscape, our play park, our battlefield, our construction site, mainly as a priority, is the church of God, is the people of God. And God asks you and I to turn up in whatever form and fashion to the people of God throughout the week, and certainly in gathered worship in our faith communities on the Sabbath. As it says, a holy convocation to come together and to scan the horizons and look for opportunities to do good. And you know what? If you do that, you will not grow weary. It is only when you down tools and you leave the construction site, you become weary and you lose heart. Don't do that. I know it's tough. I get it. I get it. I know you've been through tough times, and I know you've been through things I've never been through. And maybe I've been through things you've never been through. I know the routineness, sometimes the monotony of doing life on the pathway to the kingdom can be wearisome. It's not because we haven't been called to an exciting calling. That's, of course, true. It's because life can get us down. And God allows for wilderness seasons in our life where we can be wearied and, I guess, demoralized. God says, don't become weary. Turn up, turn up. So, how are you and I meant to turn up to the household of God, to the church of God? You know, I once read in a book a fascinating piece of wisdom. It was a kind of reflective tool. And I've thought about this much as I've gone through life. I guess I've fallen short when it comes to this reflective tool. But this is what it said. He said, you know, when you come home, when you go home, whoever you are, a husband, a wife, whether you're a son, a daughter, a brother, a sister, when you come home, before you walk through that door, Ask yourself, when I walk through that door, when I step into that home, what is the effect of my presence, my energy on that household, on the people who are there? What will I bring? What difference will I make? What effect am I going to have on the people in that house? It's worth thinking, isn't it? It's worth thinking because not only should we think about it when it comes to our own personal lives and our own family life, we should think about what effect we have when we come to the household of God, when we come to church, when we come to gathered worship. Your your effect on the church of God is not neutral. You will either take or you will give. And I think it's worth a thought. What is going to be my effect when I step through those doors, when I enter that house, whoever I'm fellowshipping, whoever I'm engaging with, what is going to be the effect of my presence on the other people? Is it going to be controversy, conflict, problems, selfishness? Or is it going to be love, giving, kindness, compassion, making emotional space for other people? That's a question that we have to ask ourselves. I remember I was going through a hard season. I work in a school and I share an office with my assistant. And I was going through a tough season, a tough season. I did not know the effect that what I was going through was going to be transmitted to my assistant. I mean, when you work in the same room with somebody, you cannot not project your internal world. And I remember getting a bit of feedback from another colleague of a conversation my assistant had with someone. It was not a conversation that was negative anyway. It was just a conversation that observed something. And I found out that my assistant, she had been talking to somebody else and said, "Oh, have you noticed Richard's a little bit more chirpy, a little bit more chippy. He seems a bit more positive." This was after a particularly difficult time in my life. And the comment was, I hope he stays like that. That got fed back to me, and I was pleased that I knew, but I was also reminded that I have and you have an effect on the people we're around. The things we go through internally, the things we go through in life, will no doubt spill out and spill over. It is important to think, how are we turning up? How are we turning up? What kind of energy and atmosphere are we bringing to the people of God? One that lifts up, pulls down, it takes from others, or gives from others. So when we think about having opportunity to do good, to look at the activities of our life and our engagement within the household of God. This simple action plan, this simple admonition is so full of meaning because it tells us that your existence, that your presence in God's church matters. It matters to other people. It matters to God because he says, I'm watching and I'm going to reward. I see what you're doing. I see you. Don't worry, nothing's wasted. Your labor's not in vain. Stay strong. Always abound in the work of the Lord. Be strong, immovable, as Paul says in Corinthians. If we are all doing good, each and every one of us, when we turn up to church, when we're turning up to the household of God, do you know what changes? Do you know what shifts? Not only you get the benefit of the reward. Yeah, God says, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to benefit you. I'm going to reward you. But other people get the benefit. It's not about your reward. It's actually about the benefit that other people gain from you turning up and doing good, and culture shifts. I don't care whether it's in a house church or in a corporate organization. If everybody is turning up to do good, to think of the other person, to live a life of give instead of get, you know what changes? Culture changes. Because culture is made up of 1,000 actions each and every time you meet. Whether it's in informal gatherings amongst God people or more formal gatherings. Last week I had the privilege, and maybe so did you have the privilege of meeting up with about 200 brethren. And I know that there's many people online. It's so lovely to see all those online. I can see the comments here. Many of you were there too, and it was so wonderful to see every single one of you. Every single one of you is loved and has a place in God's church. And I was thinking about this. We spent about 5 hours together, 200 people after the service. And I thought, what if everybody did something good, just once an hour? That would be for 200 people, 5 acts of goodness over a course of 5 hours. If you multiply 5 acts of goodness by 200 people, you get 1,000 acts of good. 1,000 things that are positive, that give, that love, that share, and that shifts culture. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if we turn up to our faith communities wherever they are? I mean, it's online today, this morning, but maybe you're going to head off to house church, maybe to a more formal gathering. And if you turn up with a posture of giving, a posture of loving, of serving, do you know what's going to happen? Three things are going to happen. And it's a wonderful thing because not only doing good is going to reward you, it's going to be a blessing for other people. Three things happen. When you come with a posture to give, your focus is outward and not inward. Your problems shrink. That's the first thing. When you come with a posture of giving, yes, we all come to church with problems. Sometimes we come with significant pain. I get it. I understand it. I know it. But when you come with a posture where it's outward and not inward, then your problems shrink and you have an outward focus. Number two, it means it enlarges the space for God's presence and minimize the space for Satan's presence. You know, Satan hates what God's people gathering together. And of course, he's going to have an effect. He's the prince of the power of the air. But when you and I turn up to church, turn up to our faith communities and give, what that means, it maximizes God's a space for God's presence, for his Holy Spirit to work in the hearts and minds of his people. Because where two or three are gathered, there I am in the midst of you. That's a promise by God. And when we do good, God can amplify and magnify the fruits of our work, our love for one another. Number three, it means that those in need and those who are weak get ministered to. You know, I had 5 conversations last week with people. 5 conversations. And those well, I had more than 5, obviously. But I'm particularly concerned about those 5 because in those 5 conversations, those people are going through tough times. I'm not talking about simple trials. I'm talking about trials where there was tears and there was prayer. So what did I do this week? And I'm sure you do the same things. I'm not tooting any horns. What do I do? Reach out, pray for them, think about them. I didn't know they were going through these trials, but because there was a posture of listening, a posture of giving, don't always do it. There was learning about the problems and the pain that other people have. But when we come with a posture to give, we lighten the load for other people. You know, maybe you're sitting there thinking, well, I've done this for so many years. I know I'm speaking to people who have been in the church for decades, who have given so much, who are so well versed in what it is to give to God's people. And you might think, well, I've given and yet I have not had the hopes that I hope for met or realized. I haven't seen the fruit. Don't worry, God says something to us in this very passage. We just have to step back 2 verses. He says something beautiful. God says, do not be deceived, verse 7 and verse 8. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, yes, you're sowing day in, day out. You have given, you have ministered, you have prayed, you have turned up, and maybe you have seen your faith community diminish. Maybe there's been problems in the church, and those problems that you've prayed for decades have not been solved. Maybe the health difficulties that you are going through, the relationship problems that you have faced, that you wish could be solved, have not been solved. Don't worry, sow, keep sowing to the good. A man sows, that will also he reap. It is a written formula for he who sows to his flesh. Now, notice this because this is not just an admonition, this is a warning. For he who sows to his flesh will of his flesh reap corruption. What does that mean? It just means if you are sowing for your own benefit, if your motive is only inward for yourself, then you'll reap that fruit. It won't be a fruit that lasts, it will corrupt. But he who sows, that is you and I, who sows to the Spirit, will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. If you are sowing things of God, if you are sowing things of give, if you are sowing actions and thoughts and words of love one to another, then eventually you will reap everlasting life, yes, in the kingdom, but you'll also reap fruit now. Your motives matter. The spirit and the attitude in which you are approaching church, in which you are going about your decisions and your conversations will matter. They will manifest fruit in time. Yes, your seeds may be buried deep. You may have walked the line, the furrows of the field, sowing, sowing, sowing. God says, I'm not deceived. I'm not what mocked. I see you. I see what you're doing. You will reap the benefits, the blessings, the good things will come in your church, in your life. Yes, The activities will eventually bear vital fruit. But God sometimes wants the faithful endurance in which builds a foundation for eternity. It's the people who are faithful that just keep turning up day in, day out, doing good, that eventually are going to end up in God's kingdom. It reminds me of the story. Well, it's not really a story, but it's a biological fact of the Chinese Moso bamboo plant. Bamboo's fascinating. It's not considered as a tree, as I found out in my research yesterday, but a plant. And I want us to note here, that bamboo grows for 3 to 5 years underground. It doesn't spring up. It doesn't sprout up. It doesn't bear the fruit, but instead it lays and invests a huge amount of energy in developing massive, complex underground root systems, absorbing the water. And eventually, about the fifth or sixth year, the bamboo can shoot up 90 feet in just a few weeks, growing at a rate of, get this, nearly 2.5 feet a day. Yes, that time's coming in your personal life, maybe in your faith communities. God sees He has a plan for you, He has a plan for His church and what He's doing. But sometimes the season in life is about sowing more than it is about reaping. It's more about building those structures, those connections one to another, developing those relationships, putting our time and energy into things and roots that mean that when we grow up, when God does bless us with the fruit, that we can weather what is to come. Sometimes bearing the fallow seasons is about fortifying yourself against the future problems that may come. That's okay. God sees that. God knows that. And God is preparing you. Your actions are laying roots in your personal life and in your collective church lives. That will mean you can weather what is to come, but the roots are going to be firm and to be solid. And so there is one simple way we can do, you and I listening today can do good in Scripture. It's actually contained within this very passage. You and I are called, are admonished to bear one another's burdens. Do we come to church with burdens? Of course we do. Sometimes those burdens of our own making, I understand. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes we trip ourselves up. Sometimes we fail. We trip, we fall down. We are flesh and blood. We are, as Paul said, there's nothing good that dwells in our flesh. But sometimes the burdens we bear are not our fault. And regardless of whether they're our fault or not, we come to church. We come to connect with other people. When we come to connect with other people, as I found out last week, people are bearing heavy burdens. Sometimes you just need to speak to people and they break down. I've done that. You've done that. And so God says in verse 2, the one thing you and I can do is bear one another's burdens. Verse 2, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Because, the household of faith can be a place of pain and difficulty too. That can be true. Sometimes when we come together, the church, instead of being a place of peace, can be a place of pain. Yeah, sometimes we bring burdens from outside of church. Sometimes our burdens are in church. That has been the case for decades for some of you who are online today, where church life has been tough and difficult. And instead of being a place of worship, it's a place of worry. Maybe a member or a minister has mistreated you. I certainly had a message this week from someone I don't know well, someone not a part of my immediate faith community, and they reached out and said, I struggled because this happened to my family at the hand of this person. It's tough. Sometimes we experience betrayal, breakdown and breakup of a friendship or a relationship, maybe even divorce in the church. And the church can be a place of pain and not of peace. At those times, it is the hardest to do good because you can be consumed with hurt and emotional difficulties. But God says, I know, I understand, and there's going to be other people there who can lift you, who can bear your burden. But what you can't do is to down tools and leave the site. God never admonished us to say, look, I'm gonna give up. I'm just gonna jump ship and just find another household. Do you know what? You find another household of faith, I can guarantee you one thing. You'll just, you'll give up one set of problems and you'll get another. Right? We're human beings. We are naturally prone to problems, to difficulties, to pain, to suffering. The grass is not greener on the other side. And so God says, regardless of what pain you are going through, what persecution, what problems that are in your way, the antidote to such problems are continue to find opportunity to do good. Do not down tools. Keep an outward focus as much as it's within you. And you sometimes will need God's help to do that because you may be so consumed with your own difficulties and problems. I understand that. And that is, by the way, the only bulwark against resentment and bitterness, because sometimes things can happen to you to make you hurt and pain that pushes you towards resentment, bitterness. So, how can this happen in the church? God understands that. Fortify yourself against those two emotions. You do not want to go there. And you fortify yourself by doing good and by bearing one another's burdens. You and I will have to bear our own burden, as it says in verse 4 to 5. But let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone and not in one another. For each one of you shall bear his own load. Yes, you will bear your own load because life is tough. But you and I have to, when we come to church, look around. Who can we give a word to? Who can we make coffee and tea for? How can we put out the chairs? How can we make emotional space? What kind of sermons and messages are we producing? Are they ones to lift up or to tear down? What kind of conversations can we have? What encouragement can we bring? Whose burden can we lift? Who can we give a lift to church? Who can we invite to church? Let's have our eyes wide open to the burdens of others and let's lift those burdens. And that will lighten the load of somebody else. Because boy, there are burdens out there. You know, when I did summer camp, as many of you know, SEP was an amazing time. SEP was a summer camp that I attended. I know many of you who are listening today attended. And it was a place where it was, well, set in beautiful Scotland, rugged Scotland, Loch Lomond. And it was a wonderful place. And I had the privilege to be a dorm leader. That means you looked after about a dozen teenagers, took them through a grueling 2-week summer camp with all the tempers and the tantrums. And then we would sometimes walk up a mountain. There was a mountain climbing activity. And it is so hard to take modern day teenagers up a mountain. It really is. We were climbing Ben Lomond. Ben Lomond is a beautiful mountain. And I remember getting, as always was the case, getting about 2/3 of the way up. And you always had somebody who wanted to stop going, wanted to stop walking. And it was the case this time. There was a boy who said, I'm done. I can't take this anymore. I'm ready to turn back. And if that has happened, one member of staff had to go back with them. And I was determined that all my boys would make it to the top of the mountain. I thought, what do I do? This guy's in an emotional place. He was dejected, a little bit teary. And when someone goes to that emotional place, that burden, how do you help them out? So I thought to myself, I knew I couldn't carry him the whole way up the mountain. But what I could do is maybe if I gave him a piggyback, maybe if I helped him a little bit, he would see that I was willing to suffer pain to help him get up the mountain. And maybe that would inject him with a bit of motivation to continue. So I said, look, get on my back. He said, Richard, you can't carry me. You can't carry me the whole way. I said, I'm not going to carry the whole way. Just get on my back. And I'm not the biggest guy. My thighs aren't the biggest thighs. But he got on my back and I started to walk. I did about 2 minutes. Of course, you breathe heavy. And he heard me breathe heavy. He heard me breathe heavy. He saw that I was willing to be able to put time, effort, and expend my energy to make sure that he got up to the top. And then he said, okay, I'll get off. You're struggling too much. And he had to get off. And then he carried on walking for a bit because he was motivated the fact that I was willing to bear his burden. And so then he would walk a bit, get tired, and then he would go and say, I can't do this anymore. So I said, jump on my back. And we did this cyclically as we walked up the mountain. He would walk, then give up. I would jump. He would jump on my back. I would continue to walk. I would feel exhausted. He would have to get off. That motivated him a bit more to continue. And eventually this cycle got us closer and closer to the pinnacle. And still he started to believe that he could get to the top. And a wonderful thing, he got to the top. Every single one got to the top. It was a proud moment for all of us as a team. You know, when we turn up to God's house, to his people, and we look around and we're willing to listen and to bear the burden of somebody else, to help support whatever that might look like, just a check-in during the week, then if we do that, we will help one another bear the burdens, reap the fruit that God wants us to reap, and eventually reach the top of the mountain of the Lord. It's been great to connect with you this morning. I see so many friends online today. I'm wishing you a happy Sabbath. Whatever you are going to do today, whoever you're connected with, sow to the good. Find opportunity to do good. Bear someone's burden. And in doing so, in time, in due season, you will reap the reward. Have a good Sabbath, and bye-bye.